At the GOP convention last summer, delegates passed six to be exact, 6 rules and regulations, or resolutions, I should say, about elections. Everything from securing them by promoting only in-person election day voting to making them all partisan because Boise City Council once offered support for gun control. And since we all already know a candidate's politics anyway, let's make them partisan. To remove the use of student IDs as a way of participating in them, which they actually did this past legislative session. So 3 of those rules and resolutions were about crossover voting, where people register as a Republican just to take part in their closed primary election, an exclusivity the GOP set up back in 2012. 2 resolutions claimed crossover voting has become a problem and there's a need to preserve the Republican brand, because if they don't, they said, the GOP won't survive the next 10 years. And if you need to dilute the primary of another party, well, you're admitting your ideas suck. Your ideas won't stand on their own in this state. And not only do your ideas suck, but you're also a hypocrite for encouraging others to cross over. That's what they said. Preserving, diluting, surviving, interesting choice of words there. So they made a rule that made it so only in order to vote in the GOP primary, you have been unaffiliated for a year ahead of that primary. You also could not have voted for a non-GOP candidate, registered as anything but Republican, or donated to any other party for 2 years prior to a primary. Well, then came the legislative session, and the GOP chair, Dorothy Moon, laid out the party's priorities for the year.
So we've got to make sure our voices are heard within this building that we do not want ranked choice voting.
Chair Moon then explained why in an op-ed piece later that month, calling ranked choice voting a silly idea, saying it complicates the process, it's confusing and cumbersome for voters, and it removes the, quote, one with the most votes wins structure, writing, in a ranked choice voting election, the candidate that wins may not be the candidate you want, but the candidate the majority can live with. A month later, a bill to ban ranked choice voting in Idaho was introduced in the House State Affairs Committee.
This is a voting system that's being spread around the country, I would say a little like a virus. It's destabilizing people's normal voting abilities, and it's, according to the people in some of these states, very harmful. Alaska has it, Maine has it, 11 counties in California are using it.
Another interesting choice of words, spreading around the country like a virus. Well, according to fairvote.org, as of last month, there were just 63 jurisdictions in the entire United States who use ranked choice voting. 2 states, 3 counties, and 58 cities. So 11 counties in California? No, there's just 6 cities in California that do that. But anyway, that bill advanced to the House floor, where it passed along party lines in both chambers and was signed into law by the governor a month after that, on March 24th. So Idaho now has a ban on ranked choice voting, which will go into effect this July. But for how long that lasts, well, that could change, because this is where these roads of crossover voting and ranked choice voting converge. Today, a coalition, yes, another one, are launching a campaign asking Idahoans how they want to vote. Here's Joe Paris.
A coalition of Idahoans say they want to change the way Idaho votes.
I think it's a badly needed policy to sort of bring some normalcy back to Idaho politics.
Todd Achilles is a member of the Idaho Task Force of Veterans for Political Innovation, one of the groups that is a part of Idahoans for Open Primaries, an effort to end Idaho's closed primary system. The coalition is launching a signature campaign to qualify a ballot initiative for the November 2024 general election. The idea they are pitching to Idaho, a top 4 nonpartisan primary election. All candidates, regardless of party, would participate in a single primary election. The top 4 vote getters would then advance to the general election. From there, the general election would go into an instant runoff, also called ranked choice voting in other places. Voters pick their top candidate and then rank remaining candidates in order of their preference. 2, 3, 4, you get the idea. And if no candidate wins with more than 50% of the vote after all the first choice rankings are tallied, then the candidate in last place is eliminated from the vote, and each vote that candidate got is then transferred to a voter's second choice candidate. That process goes on until at least one candidate gets over 50% of the vote, and they are then declared the winner.
Why do you and your group think this is a good time to do this? And I guess what's the motivation behind this campaign?
Well, listen, since the primaries were closed by the Republican Party in 2011, let's just say Idaho politics have not improved. And I hear this from my Republican friends, my independent friends, my Democrat friends. Everybody's frustrated by sort of this slow decline in Idaho politics and this rise of extremist factions. And I think the basis in this is it used to be you get elected by bringing people together. Now, because of closed primaries, you get elected by being divisive, by having sort of that narrowest base. And that's the core of the problem.
Of major note, Idaho lawmakers passed and Governor Little signed a law this year to ban implementation of ranked choice voting. The Idahoans for Open Primaries Coalition is fully aware of heavy pushback on the idea from Republican lawmakers and Idaho GOP leaders. Those critics of the idea say that ranked choice voting and open primaries, it convolutes the current process.
Yeah, well, the arsonist doesn't like funding the fire department. So I think what you'll hear is those that have benefited from closed primaries are going to be the ones that will be most vocal in terms of pushing back against this initiative.
Resistance to American systems like voting changing is not new, and Achilles says that history shows that examining those systems for change has an impressive track record.
The 17th Amendment allowed us to directly elect senators. The 19th Amendment was women's allowed to vote, right? I mean, that was sort of a big issue for this country that women weren't allowed to vote until 1920. We had the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I mean, there's so many examples in the history of this country where we've said the system's not working as well as it should. We need to make some changes.
So as always here in the media, we say, Idahoans could soon be voting on this. What does that actually look like? Well, this is the goal is to have this on the November 2024 ballot. And if it does qualify, which there is a long road to getting initiative on the ballot in Idaho, then Idahoans would have to pass it by a simple majority. And Brian, this wouldn't be the first time in recent years that we've seen initiative processes. Of course, this past cycle, we saw Idahoans vote to allow Idaho lawmakers to call themselves back.
Is this more of a open primary issue, or is this a ranked choice voting issue?
It's actually, when I talk to people and I kind of look at it myself, it's two separate issues that are kind of pulled into one, because ranked choice voting is something that people have been passionate about. Changing the closed primaries in Idaho is another thing. These are kind of combined.
Because in many areas of the state, your choice is obvious. You don't get a choice on the other side.
Right.
And so those people in the minority kind of feel like they only have to, if they have to choose the lesser of two evils, they got to go jump into that primary.
Yeah.
So all right, we'll see what happens now, because now it goes to the people. All right, thank you very much, Joe.